Our e-presentation is on Ethiopia and Hofstede's cultural dimensions for the class Cultural Aspects of Global Trade with Dr. Carmen Dima. Our presentation is by Natasha Martin, Doyan Olagunju, Joanna Polillo, Konstantin Pochavilko, and with a special guest appearance by Dr. Dawit Ashetu. Today we're going to give you an introduction to Ethiopia, and we're going to talk about Hofstede's cultural dimensions and how they apply to Ethiopia in terms of power distance, individualism and collectivism, uncertainty avoidance, masculinity and femininity, as well as long-term and short-term orientation. The Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia is located in the Horn of Africa and is the second most populated country in Africa. Unlike other African nations, Ethiopia maintained freedom from colonial rule with the exception of a short Italian occupation from 1936 to 1941. Despite a history of famine and war, Ethiopia is now the largest economy by GDP in Central and East Africa and is growing steadily in terms of economic growth. The country's agricultural sector comprises the majority of its economy, with coffee as a major export. With approximately 80 indigenous languages, Ethiopia is an extremely multicultural and multi-ethnic society where English is also widely spoken. Religion plays a major role in Ethiopia's society, with the majority of the population belonging to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. However, there's also a significant Muslim population which plays a key role in the country's business community. The country's culture is characterized by the importance that is placed on family. The needs of the family come before all other responsibilities and obligations, including those of business. In terms of communication, Ethiopians tend to be sensitive, speaking in soft tones and valuing eloquence and wit. To this end, Ethiopians also tend to be non-confrontational, as they also hold the honor and dignity of those they deal with of utmost importance.
Hofstede's cultural dimensions attempts to understand the cultural differences among nations of the world. The differences are understood through the cultural dimensions of individualism or collectivism, power distance, uncertainty avoidance, masculinity or femininity, and long-term versus short-term orientation. Each country is scored using a scale of 0 to 100 for each of the dimensions. This presentation will illustrate Ethiopia through each of the 5 dimensions in order to provide an understanding of the country's culture. According to Hofstede's cultural dimension, Ethiopia is a high power distance country and has a high power distance score of 70. According to Hofstede, Ethiopians believe that people are destined to be unequal. Therefore, inequality is very much accepted. They also accept unequal distribution of power as part of their everyday lives. Even though unequal distribution of power is readily accepted, Ethiopians at the top and bottom of the organization do not see each other as unequal, but complementary. It is acceptable for the powerful members of society to have access to certain privileges that the less powerful members don't. Lower-level members of organizations do not get upset or feel offended by the inequality. In fact, they approve of societal norms that emphasize that one is only entitled to such privileges once the individual has worked their way to the top of the organization, and people at the bottom of the organization are not deserving of such privileges.
It's a traditional society. Ethiopian culture is traditional society, and it's so true. It's changing a little bit, and so we have to differentiate it in the business private sector. For example, you have combination of both the power distance and high and low. But in the public sector, that's where you see still the strong, the traditional and high power distance relationship. And a simple example is that, for example, very common here, you can go into any offices, you can directly talk to the decision maker, and there is no pre-screening procedures but in Ethiopian context, what you can see is it's almost common where first you have to talk to the assistants, and then you have to go through executive assistant, and then if necessary and if they allow you, then you can talk to the person, and it's, reaching there is very difficult, and that reflects not only in terms of the structure and the organization setup, but in every day in the decision making also. It's decisions take place very slowly, and top down, and minimum consultation, and it's a major problem.
Individualism and collectivism best describes the degree of interdependence a society maintains amongst its members. The score of 20 indicates that Ethiopia is considered to be a collectivistic society. In the 20th century, Ethiopia was constantly influenced by numerous events like occupation during the Second World War, abolition of slavery, abolition of monarchy, rise and fall of communism, series of wars, droughts, and hunger. These harsh conditions shaped the values and attitudes of population in this country, which ultimately led to higher levels of collaboration within the society. Together, it was significantly easier to overcome the difficulties and hardships that people were struggling with. Those that decide to conduct business in Ethiopia have to be well aware that members of this society still have a close and long-term commitment to the family. Loyalty in such a collectivistic culture is dominant and overrides most of the social rules and regulations.
Yeah, with regard to the collectiveness of the culture, and it's true, very collective. And you know what, I've done research on entrepreneurship and small businesses. One of the things I did was what makes some people so venturesome, so entrepreneurs than others. And I found actually that the cultural context in Ethiopia to be entrepreneur is not very fertile, and that has to do with the tradition, with the culture in the society. And one of the things is this collectiveness of it. And there is a saying, for example, and somebody told me that he's a successful man, but he told me that how difficult it is for him to stay successful and to grow his business further. And one of the things he said was that, I came from a very poor family, and he came from a rural society, traditional society, where expectation is very high, that your success is not determined by your success, but by the success of the people around you. So he is expected to support everybody. And in fact, he told me a proverb, Ethiopian old proverb. He said, a rich man who has 99 poor relatives, he will be the hundreds the next year. So in a way, you have to share, you have to, it's not about you, it's about everybody. And it has to do with the religious background. There is this, the old traditional Orthodox Christian culture, where I could tell you 100 proverbs, where basically everything is related to your religion. So everything you do is about religion. Everything you do has to be in line with religious philosophy. And thinking about yourself, this self-interest and monetaristic, and those are not necessarily societal values. So it's very collective in that regard.
Ethiopia scores a 52 on the Uncertainty Avoidance Index. This high numerical value correlates with the fact that Ethiopians do not respond well with the idea of change in all aspects of life, whether it be change in their job or economical and social changes. Ethiopians prefer to interact with people professionally and socially, who are viewed as cautious and reserved, as they don't much like the idea of not being able to predict certain reactions. Furthermore, Ethiopians are heavily reliant on the stability and structure of the economic practices put forth by their ruling government, and believe what they have to say to be true. In terms of Ethiopian business organizations, their culture, values, and uncertainty avoidance are all realized. According to an analysis conducted on the public sector in Ethiopia, 56% said the probability of their organizations encouraging risk is low. Therefore, this statistic proves that uncertainty avoidance index is seen through all aspects of Ethiopian life.
Masculinity and femininity is more of a measurement of to what extent society stresses achievements or nurture. For Ethiopia, this score is fairly high, at 65, which ultimately identifies this society as masculine. It indicates that many Ethiopians are success-driven people that are willing to achieve their goals. Most of them will be willing to engage in competition instead of participating in negotiation or compromise. In terms of conducting business in Ethiopia, it is important to be aware that those values starts in school and continues throughout organizational behavior. Managers are expected to be decisive and assertive. The emphasis is on competition and performance, and conflicts are resolved by fighting them out. In terms of incentivizing employees, the easiest ways to increase their pay, since the most of them money seems to be of paramount importance. However, in terms of gender equality, there is a gender wage gap. Also, you can find fewer women in management positions.
For long-term and short-term orientation, Ethiopia receives a low score of 25, suggesting that the characteristics and values that best suit the nation as a whole pertain to short-term orientation. Short-term orientation values are focused towards the past and present and thus are stagnant. Such values that relate to this sort of orientation are as follows: personal steadiness and stability, protecting your face, respecting your tradition, and reciprocation of greetings, favors, and gifts. Furthermore, the short-term orientation values that Ethiopia has can be attributed to their culture, customs, and beliefs. More specifically, connected with their uncertainty avoidance traits, in that Ethiopians are very much concerned with the unknown and change. Therefore, through this analysis, it is easily understood how the importance of being able to protect face and have personal stability is of grave importance.
In conclusion, the rich multi-ethnic culture of Ethiopia has been uniquely formed over hundreds of years through the country's history and the fact that they escaped the outside influences and control through colonization. Through Hofstede's cultural dimensions of individualism and collectivism, power distance, uncertainty avoidance, masculinity and femininity, and long versus short-term orientation, an understanding of Ethiopia's cultural norms are clearly understood and illustrated. Ethiopia is a very traditional society, with the importance of family at its heart. There are many customs and ceremonies preserved in everyday social interactions in this country. This observance of etiquette is equally strong in the workplace, and those who wish to do business in Ethiopia need to be aware of what's considered polite and understand, as well as appreciate, that the values the country's culture is based upon is of incredible importance. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope you enjoyed our presentation.